On behalf of First Dakota National Bank, I want to welcome all of you to AgriVisions 2015. My name is Nate Franzine. I'm president of the AgriVisions division here at First Dakota, and it's really great to see the room packed and needing to grab more chairs. We wondered, with the weather as nice as it is, if you'd have more work to do back on the farm, or if you'd come tonight. We're glad you came. You're not going to regret it. We've got some great things that we want to cover with you. It's great that usually we're dealing with ice or blizzard or something. Here on the East Coast is enjoying good weather. We flip-flopped this year just for you so that we could have this event tonight. So great to have you with us. I want to make a few opening remarks before we turn it to our keynote speaker and just update all of you on some of the things we have going at First Dakota National Bank and in our Ag division right now. Many of you may have noticed some of our TV commercials and TV campaign. I want to incorporate a little of that in tonight, so we're going to start with our first one. Jim Wooster is a member of our Ag Advisory Board, and Jim, so you see on the screen there, and we'll be hearing from Jim here in just a second. Well, that's coming up. I know there's other Ag Advisory Board members and board members in the room. Could I have all of our board and Ag Advisory Board stand, please? Board members. Dan Eisenbaum, Larry Ness, Chairman of the Board, Rob Ness, Darren Ness, Rob Stevenson in the back, Chad Heckathorn, Advisory Board member. Thanks for being here. Let's hear it from Jim.
I've seen the goods, I've seen the bads, I've seen the highs, I've seen the lows, and I like it. It's what I can tell you about. Jim Wooster, so I lived in Sioux Falls, spent my whole life there basically. I got out of South Dakota State in 1962. Graduated Monday night, started stockyards the next morning, and was there 44 years. Various capacities, all involving cattle. Well, obviously, agriculture is huge in any community, Sioux Falls, Rapid City, Yankton, but especially if you get into communities like where I grew up, Chamberlain or Salem, Haytide, wherever it might be, because that's the elevator and the implement dealership and the feed store and all the stuff that's ag-related. That's their whole community. If you drive through any small town and look at the businesses that are ag-related, almost all of them have something to do with, as I said, implements or cattle or machinery or a new pickup, whatever it might be. We've got ag leaders, including South Dakota State University and health science people, that the entire nation turns to when they want advice or information. And that to me, I've always been proud of that our plain old South Dakota people on the feedlots or in the banks or at South Dakota State or in the elevator, that they're so good at what they do that everybody in the country knows who they are. And not only that, we'll turn to them when they're having a problem or need to talk about a potential building or whatever they're doing. And we've got a lot of those people in our state, a lot of them. If things are going good, we can all do good. We don't need a lot of help. But when you get into a deal like this really bad drought or bad prices or whatever it might be, and you've got a good relationship with the people that you do business with, and especially your lender, it really makes it easier to survive and get into next year. Next year will be better. It always is. And that, when you get into hard times, if you're not getting along with your banker, I'll tell you what, everything else is just magnified. The biggest change and the most rewarding for me personally is to see the fact that now, compared to 25 years ago, these kids can come back home. The son can come home, the daughter can come home with her new husband, and they can all be a part of the operation, and they're not going to leave. The places now don't have to be sold to somebody that nobody knows because they don't have enough money to go on. It's working so well, but finally agriculture in the last few years is really getting rewarded for the investment and for their labor. And that didn't happen up until about 8, 10 years ago. There's finally enough money on these family farms that the young people can come back, mom and dad can help a little bit, and then retire, and then the grandson and the grandson after that. And it's really, really been a wonderful thing to see.
Those of you that know Jim Wooster, he's certainly a leader in agriculture in this state, in this region, and we're really proud to have him on our Ag Advisory Board and be part of our sounding board as a bank as we look to leaders in the industry to tell us what can we do better to serve all of you, our valued customers. One of the things Jim talked about was youth coming back to the farm. And if you've been to these sessions in the past, you know how important that is to First Dakota. We started a beginning farmer program back in 2012. And There's a picture of our first group. Here's a picture of the 2013 group. And then we made a decision after the 2013 class that we're going to offer this beginning farmer program every other year. So we took 2014 off, so to speak, and got the alumni together during that off year. But now 2015, we're back to having the program. For those of you that don't know what our beginning farmer program is, it is not what you might think. It's not a low interest rate program, although we are all about giving beginning farmers the best rates and terms we can to help them get involved in agriculture. Our beginning farmer program is an educational program. It's all about training and helping the next generation of agriculture be more prepared for the ups and downs, the cycles, the volatility of agriculture. So we meet 4 times in the course of the year. We cover everything from financial management to marketing, succession, global economics, leadership, all kinds of things. Dr. David Poole comes and speaks to them, Dr. Ed Seafried, Bob Craven from the University of Minnesota, Ed Hussett from the University of Minnesota, Jolene Brown talks about family business dynamics. So really a great program, and here's a list of some of the folks that have been selected for this year's program, 2015, and so you can see some of the folks that are part of the program. You do not have to be a customer of the bank to get in the program. Certainly, we have lots of customers that are a part of the program, but it's not a requirement of the program. A requirement is that you have been in farming 10 years or less, and that you're willing to make the commitment to be a part of the session over the course of the year and be committed to attending. So something we're very, very proud of is our beginning farmer program, and we've already found a lot of great success with those that have went through it. Here you see a picture of the Klum family. We're going to show you another quick video, but the Klum family from near the Mitchell area. Larry is also on our Ag Advisory Board, and this spot focuses on legacy.
I guess the favorite part of my work is looking out a tractor cab and looking over and seeing one of the boys in a different tractor or grandson coming up beside you with his drain cart. Seeing 3 generations work together hand in hand, it's as good as it gets.
So there we talk about legacy, and that's a great transition into me talking a little bit about a brand new program at First Dakota. This program's only been up and running about 8 months. It's a new department within our Ag Division. We call it Keep Farmers Farming. It's a consulting strategy. We have 2 consultants on board today, legacy consultants, we call them. I'll introduce both of them in just a minute. But through our Keep Farmers Farming department, we are out working with farms and ranches and helping them do 3 things. Number 1, helping them with strategic planning. So we'll come in and we'll facilitate a strategic planning session for your farm and ranch. And you might say, well, what is that? Some of you know what strategic planning is, some may not. We get into a lot of things. We'll survey all of the members of the family and have them weigh in on what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of your farm. What are the objectives we need to be focusing on as we go forward? We'll do a behavioral style survey with that, and that's a great tool to help family members and stakeholders of your farm understand each other better so you can communicate better. And then we get into just what this says, identifying the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of your farm, and then using that information to establish goals and objectives, put some action behind it to help make your farm a better place, a better operation, more efficient, more profitable, and more successful. The second of the 3 things we're doing, we're calling it succession planning, but when we say succession planning, it's really all about just helping farmers and ranchers implement best practices to your farm. We touch on some of them here. Some of it is HR structure and systems, code of conduct, PTO policies for employees, and that does apply to family members, by the way, right? There's never animosity in a family operation about who takes off more time or less, right? We'll help you with that. We'll help you establish some of those guidelines that make sense for your farm. You drive this, we're just here to help. Communication, how often do you meet as a team on your farm? How frequent is that meeting? How does scheduling work? One of the big things we're coming across is financial performance and budgeting. Is that getting communicated well to all the stakeholders, so those that are key people in your farm, maybe the next generation, have an understanding and can learn about the success of the farm as you go along. And the third area under succession, certainly a real big one, leadership, training, and mentorship. There we talk about preparing the next generation, training non-farm labor, non-family labor, I should say, and then planning for a successful exit. Obviously, none of us want to deal with the retirement mode in most cases, right? We're going to farm forever, but we know it happens. We know it's part of the evolution of any business, so how do we help you make that as seamless a transition as possible? And we're here to try and help you with that. And then the last area in our Key Farmers farming strategy is estate planning. And what we do in the estate planning process, we're not out there to sell you anything. We're not out selling insurance. We're not out selling products or services. We're there to help you define how you want that transition to go, the transition of your assets, the planning, and how that'll go, how we help you minimize estate tax issues if that's a situation in your farm. It's all about helping that be as seamless as possible. And our goal there is to keep your farm in the family for generations, help that transition to the next generation and well beyond. So here's our two legacy consultants. Alan's in the room. I know, Alan, would you stand? And it's Don Kettering as well. Don is back by the door. Don and Alan have been at this for about 8 months now. We're helping lots and lots of folks with the three things I just talked about. I wanted to point them out to you. They're here tonight, so when we're all done, if you have any interest in any of this, don't hesitate to grab one of them and visit. One more video, and we'll go forward.
Here on the farm, we've got 3 houses. There's 4 generations that live here.
One of my first memories is going out to do chores with my dad.
There's never a boring time because it's always different. Every spring is a new challenge, a different opportunity.
The sweat, the tears, the blood, there's a reward in it.
That one says we invest in hard work, and the last few comments I want to make before we bring on our keynote speaker is about that investment in all of you, our customers, how we go about that. Here you see part of a picture of our CEO and chairman of the board. But the phrase says, let's have a tough conversation, and all we mean by that is we don't want to create tough conversations. We're not saying that it's tough to do business with us. What we're saying here is, ag is cyclical. We all know that. There's ups and downs, just like in any other business. There's easy times, there's challenging times, and we want all of you to know we're partners with you through all of that, the good, the bad, the ugly. And we want to be a strong partner with you and help you through those bumps, the turbulence that come here and there. Here's how we do that. At your desk, or your tables, there's a few of our newsletters. Hopefully all of you are signed up to get those on a regular basis. If you're not, please let us know and we'll get you signed up to receive those going forward. But you can see the key article on this last newsletter is Through Thick and Thin, and it's all about First Dakota's commitment to agriculture in good times and in challenging times. And that's what it's all about. We do that by focusing on these 3 C's, what we call the 3 C's of exceptional ag banking, and that is being conservative in the good times, being courageous in the challenging times, but being consistent all the time. And that's our goal at First Dakota, and we want all of you to know about it, and we want you to know we're committed to working with you in agriculture through all of those different scenarios we get thrown at us. Also at your table, there's a little flyer. On that flyer, it tells you all the different ways you can follow First Dakota throughout the year, stay connected with us on information. FirstDakotaAg.com, our website. We have lots of information posted out there daily. Dr. Cole puts monthly publications out there, Dr. Seafried as well, so a great resource for all of you, timely information, the markets, and many more. Please go there. A place to follow us if you want to text, follow us on Twitter or follow us through text messages. And then you'll see the website there. Our speaker tonight, Dr. Brent Gloy, has created a website just for us, ageconomist.com/First Dakota. following tonight's session, you can go there, you'll see his slides from this evening, so you can go back and review those after his talk, as well as other important information is available for you at that site. Before I bring on Dr. Gloy, I wanted all of our staff at First Dakota to please stand at this time. Would you just stand? You saw at the beginning we had a PowerPoint presentation rolling. We are very proud of the team of professionals we have at First Dakota, and I just wanted to recognize them before we get started. Please help me give them a round of applause. At this time, we're going to bring up Dr. Brent Gloy. Dr. Gloy is certainly not a stranger to me. We crossed paths off and on over the last several years. Dr. Gloy is formerly with Purdue University, but as you may have heard through a lot of the marketing for this event, he has recently left his tenured position as a professor to go back to the family farm in southwest Nebraska. So he's one of you. He's a farmer just like all of you. And we're really excited and proud to have him here. So please help me welcome Dr. Brent Gloy.
It's really great to be here. One of the nice things when you do the speaking is you get to travel around the country, and I can honestly say I really like coming to South Dakota. I have few friends in western Nebraska whose family, my sister actually lives in Sioux Falls, and a few of their families have relocated up here. If you want to get them a little misty-eyed, they start talking about South Dakota, such a beautiful place, and it's a really nice place. You're really fortunate to live here. I've always enjoyed it, so it's really great to be here. The other thing I have got to say, watching those videos, is, to me that's powerful, because I heard in those videos a couple things. The long term. I mean, all of you in this room understand the long term. You wouldn't be in agriculture if you did. We didn't do it just for the last 3 or 4 years, which were pretty darn good, weren't they? Yeah. It's a long-term proposition, isn't it? And to be able to come in and speak for a bank that understands that, understands legacy, I think is really a pleasure. So I appreciate the chance to be here. I want to just talk to you a little bit tonight about, I'm going to give you what I call the Ag Outlook in 10 questions. So we'll pose the question, then I'll try and give you my opinion on where it's going and where things are shaping up. Then we'll talk a little bit about 12 things you can do to better manage your business for the margin squeeze that we're experiencing right now and are likely, in my opinion, to experience for a while. So now's the time to really get prepared for that, and we'll talk about that. As Nate mentioned, there's a website there. I write with a colleague of mine who's still at Purdue. We have a website called ageconomist.com. We put out an article pretty much every week on the ag economy and things that are going on. This week's post that just went up today was about the value of the dollar, which is a pretty hot topic that is, I think, impacting our ag markets and probably will for a while. So check that out if you get a chance. But what I like to do when I start is I just want to read. I got the chance to speak at the USDA Outlook Forum last year. And the big news coming out of the Outlook Forum last year was farm incomes were down, okay? And the press all go to this thing, and they all pick it up, and they write stories about it. And here was the story that caught my eye. We're looking at an era of about 3, 4, 5 years of reduced profitability in agriculture, said an economist at what we in Nebraska refer to as the evil empire of Ohio State University. Purdue does too, okay, before the report was released. Without significant disruptions, by 2015 and 16, farms expanded rapidly, could be vulnerable. We see the first significant farm failures. The slump of value in U.S. crops will erode prosperity in the Corn Belt, harming rural businesses, and if sustained, may lead to a wave of farm failures for the first time in a generation. Who wants to quit their tenured, full professor job at Purdue University and go to the farm? Sounds like fun, doesn't it? Okay? Well, I did, okay? I'll tell you a little bit why. But again, it comes down to that idea, I think, of, this is a long-term proposition. Have we seen tough times in agriculture before? Yeah, everybody in this room has been through some version of that, right? Did we make it through? Yeah, a lot of us did, okay? Now, I think the future is pretty bright, but not that it's going to be without challenges. The other thing I tell people is, you just went through the best 7-year period in agricultural history in the United States. The best. Go all the way back, as far as you want to go. I challenge you to find 7 years that were as good as the last 7 before 2014. 2014 wasn't that bad. But those 7 years before that are the best that I can find in history. Okay? So it was good. To think that it's going to be that good forever, I think is pretty optimistic. And so I think we're now to the point where we're going to have to recalibrate a little bit as to what our expectations are, but over the long run, I'm expecting them to be pretty good. So let's just tell you, I just want to give you a little bit of a sense for what the decision was that we made, to give you a little bit of insight into where I'm coming from. This is a map that shows where we lived in Purdue, West Lafayette, Indiana, and we moved way out here, okay, to a little town called Grant, Nebraska. Now, I don't know, did anybody know who Prescott Webb was? Anybody? Anybody know that name? Prescott Webb is a famous historian. Prescott Webb was from Texas, but he wrote the definitive work on the Great Plains in the 1930s. And in that work, he identified a certain geographical feature called the 100th meridian. And Prescott Webb said that anything to the west of the 100th meridian was what? The Great American Desert. Absolutely. So I'm with my people now, okay? Because I did this in Wisconsin, and people are like, what's the Great American Desert? Well, I live on the edge of it, okay? Our farm is at the 101st meridian. Okay? So we're kind of in a very different environment, rainfall-wise, than you would be. So what I say is, it's 1,000 miles, but it's really a world apart in terms of geography and whatnot. The second thing people always ask me is, well, your wife's from there, right? My wife, this is our town, Grant. You can see the little Pac-Men out there. Those are the center pivot irrigation systems. This is where my wife grew up, and it says Montgomery County. That's Montgomery County, Maryland, which is right outside of Washington, D.C. Now, our population is 2,921 people. We are rounding error on Montgomery County, Maryland, which has 971,000. So she did not grow up on a farm by any means, by any stretch of imagination. So her opinion was going to be pretty important. Now, she's an agronomist. She's worked with a lot of farm families, and one of the things she decided was that I've worked with a lot of farmers, and one thing I've noticed is they're all pretty darn happy. And I think that went a long way in swaying her decision. So this is just our history. My grandparents both homesteaded out there. I guess they got tired. They went by Iowa and like, oh man. So now actually it rained a lot in those days when they were homesteading. It was a period of above average rainfall. They homesteaded out there. One of my grandparents decided that he was not a very good farmer right off the bat. He went into the banking business and founded a community bank and then built another one. We were in that business for 75 years. And he didn't have a successor. For whatever reason, he decided to sell the business. And I often thought about that. That was in the back of my mind. Here's the farm business that we've had for a long time now, too. And if we have no successor, the legacy, the opportunity is kind of forgone. It's really hard to get back to that. So these are just some pictures. I put this up here because you can see this was the favorite horse. Those two were not as popular, but that one made the front row of the picture. So, okay. So our operation today, we have quite a few center pivots. We do a lot of irrigating. You can see my daughter thinks she's tough digging those pivots out. We grow quite a bit of wheat on dry land. It's really flat where we live. Most of what we operate is pretty flat. and those pivots keep us working, and other people, they don't say, well, you're just sitting in the office doing it. No, we're out doing this. My parents and my wife and I do a lot of the work out there, so we actually get out and do it. So I also founded a firm called Agricultural Economic Insights, and as I mentioned earlier, we write kind of weekly on the ag economy. So the first question, that's out of the way. Okay? The first question, I think, when it comes to what the ag situation is what's the situation in the U.S. economy? Because this is going to be really important for us going forward, and I'll tell you why. And I want to look at economic growth, inflation, employment, and interest rates. And these factors, you might be saying, oh, what the heck, you're talking about the ag economy, what are you talking about the U.S. economy, why? Well, let me tell you why. This chart shows world economic growth in green, that's emerging economies in green, world economic growth in red, and U.S. or developed country growth in blue. Now, it looks a little bit squiggly and all that, but I'm a simple kind of guy. And I noticed one thing about that. Where has the growth been for, say, since about 1995? Which of those economies has grown faster? Emerging or developed? Emerging, okay? Something to keep in mind. Emerging economy growth is really important, and they have led for a long time. We in the developed world have been behind, slower growth. Now keep in mind, 1 out of every 6 or 7 people live in a developed economy. 6 out of 7 live in emerging economies. Where's the growth been? Emerging. Where's the demand for agricultural products increasing fastest? Emerging economies. It's going to be really important to see where that emerging economy growth goes, because one of the biggest concerns, and one of the reasons my outlook is not quite as bright as it would have been, say, 3 or 4 months ago, is that it's starting to look more and more clear like the emerging economies are slowing. Okay? And it's something we're going to have to watch very carefully going forward, because if they slow down a lot, it's going to put a crimp in our style. Okay? So keep an eye on that emerging economy. Now, in the U.S., think about this. There's a rule called the Rule of 72. Anybody know that one? Somebody, I'm sure, knows that. Rule of 72 basically tells you divide your growth rate into 72, tells you how long it takes something to double. Okay? So if you're in China and you've been growing at, let's just use 10%, how often does your economy double? Every 7 years. If you're in the United States and your economy is growing at 2.5, well, let's just lock it down to 2. Roughly, how long does it take to double? 36 years, right? 36 times 2, 72. That's slow, right? So my kids, I got a couple doubles in them, okay? But think about what their economy in the United States might double twice. A big difference in terms of economic growth. China is slowing considerably. Now, are they going to slow down to 2% where we're at? Probably not. We hope not, at least. That would be a real big problem for them. They're probably going to slow down into the 5 to 7% range, which is still pretty rapid, but a lot slower than they've been growing at, and it's going to put some strains on their economy, just keeping, they have a population relocating to urban areas right now the size of the United States population. Think about that. I mean, it kind of blows your mind. Okay? So it's something to keep an eye on, this emerging market growth going forward. And right now the signs are not quite as favorable as they have been. Now in the United States, our economy is actually looking pretty good, isn't it? All the signs are looking a lot better. Unemployment is down considerably. This is the unemployment rate. We peaked out here at, what was it, about 10%. We're now under 6%. Why is 6% important? Look, the Federal Reserve has told us interest rates are going up when? When unemployment gets to, well, first they said 6%, be ready, and then they lowered it down to 5.5%, and now we're there again, okay? So the Fed is telling us, look, we want the labor market to get better. But now it's kind of getting to the point where we're starting to approach what economists refer to as nirvana, or long-run kind of full employment in the United States, which is about 5.2% by most economists' view. So the labor market is finally starting to pick up, okay? And this is going to put pressure on the U.S. Fed to think about raising rates, okay? Because if they let it go too long, it's going to put pressure on inflation. And they don't want to act too soon, because if they do, it may kill off this recovery. So that's the line the Fed's walking. They've got a dual mandate. Dual mandate tells them, look, you got to do two things in life. One, run the economy at near full employment, and two, promote a durable currency, i.e., don't give us inflation, or deflation, even worse. Now, inflation, on the other hand, this is what's given, I think, the Fed some room to run, is that our inflation rate continues to be really low. The Fed has told us 2% is the magic number. We want 2%. And you just can't seem to get it. Okay? And so, in some ways, I think this has given the Fed the ability to say, look, we're going to keep interest rates low until we start to see some inflation. So I would watch that. Now, on the other hand, think about Europe. Europe is a mess. And this is part of the reason that the emerging economies are slowing down. Europe is an absolute train wreck right now. Okay? And their economy is teetering on and probably experiencing deflation. Why is deflation so bad? Well, let's say I want to buy a new pickup. What do you do if you're in a deflationary environment? Wait till tomorrow. It's cheap, right? What do you do tomorrow? Wait till tomorrow. Just keeps getting, it grinds economic activity to a halt. And it's very hard to get out of it. And so you saw the European Central Bank announce their version of quantitative easing the other day. They're trying to get some inflation going, because right now, if you want to make a deposit, Nate, I wouldn't recommend this. If you want to make a deposit in many countries in Europe, what do you get? Interest? No, you get a bill, right? Thanks, we're storing your money for you. Here's what it costs, okay? That is a crazy environment to be in. The United States, even in the depth of the financial crisis, I saw only a few people mention the idea of negative interest rates. Europe, they've got bonds, German bonds, negative yields. What is that saying? Think about that. You're giving the money to the government, they're giving you back less than you gave them. You're getting interest rate. Why would you do that? Well, in part because you think maybe prices are going to go down, and that may be worth more than if you had held it, okay, or invested it. It tells me the world is a lousy place for investment. The best thing, a lot of people, when you think about interest rates, 10-year treasury bond falling back around 2%. 2% on a 10-year bond? Think about that. You give the government your money, and they give you back 2%, and you do it for 10 years. Does that sound like a great deal to anybody? Not really, okay? That's part of the reason why farmland values are high. It's part of the reason why stocks are high. It's because it influences opportunity costs. And right now, Europe is moving rates down, okay? And we're getting ready to move rates up. Strengthen the dollar, it's going to be a tough environment for us. Almost every other major bank, central bank in the world today is talking about reducing rates, except for the United States. It's going to put a lot of upward pressure on the value of the dollar if that continues. Okay? Don't take my word for it. This is the Federal Reserve. They actually surveyed members of the FOMC, people who set the interest rates. Okay? These folks, they survey them every time. They say, look, when are you going to, you think we're going to have to raise interest rates? These are like 16, I guess, of the top economists in the world. They pull the lever. They surveyed them at the last meeting. 15 of them said rates are going up in 2015. Two said, I guess there's 17 of them. Two said rates are going up in 2016. When is the Fed telling you rates are going up? My undergrads at Purdue get this question, right? 2015. 2015. They're telling you rates are going up in 2015. Now the real question then is how much? This is the same survey. Now each dot is a head. Okay, it's a person. And this is where we're at on interest rates right now. This was 2014, 25 basis points in the Fed funds rate. All of them said we're not going up in 2014. Here's what they look like in 2015. There's one person or two people that said we're holding pat. One of them probably the guy down the road here in Minneapolis. One of my guesses as to who that is. They don't tell you who they are. But the thing I think is interesting is where are they telling you? Are we talking about rates going 5%? No, they're saying, look, here's the range. The highest three people said it might get up to 2%. Most of the people are right around 1%. So what does that mean to me? That means I think rates are going up. I don't think they're going to go up so much that it's going to put a serious crimp in our style of agriculture, okay? But look for them to go up. Now the other side of the coin is every time an economist has come and spoke to you and said, rates are going to do what? They can't go any lower. What have they done? Gone lower. Okay? If I knew where interest rates were going, I would not be here today. If we ain't, wouldn't be here. It's really hard to know. And there's lots of moving parts, but I think the Fed has given us a pretty clear signal. Look, in the next year, expect some tightening on short-term interest rates. Now, long-term rates then are a little bit different beast because that's like the 10-year rate now we're talking about. Before, we're talking about very short-term rates. Here's the 10-year Treasury rate. We peaked out at 15% in 1982 or 3. Now we're back down in that 2% range. Okay? That is a very long-term decline. That's a pretty solid trend, right, that we've experienced. I think it's hard to see this kind of, if we get this kind of an increase, like we did back in the 80s, where we went from 7.5 to 15 in about 4 years, that's really bad for us. I don't think that's going to happen. There are a lot of things going on at that time that are different than they were. What do we have? Lots of inflation, right? But now we're dealing with the opposite problem. We're worried about inflation being too low. Okay? And then we had a Federal Reserve Chairman that came in and said, when does inflation end? Today. And I'm going to take interest rates as high as they need to go in order to kill it. Did he kill it? Yeah, he did. He may get the privilege of paying 20% on operating line of credit as a result. Probably a few of them, okay? Or close to it. That kind of turmoil is really bad for agriculture. I don't think we're going to see that. Okay, that's one of the things I think is really different from today versus the 1980s. Lots of economic, macroeconomic turmoil, particularly in the United States, and I just don't see it today in the United States. So what's this mean for ag profitability? So we talked about the big picture. Now let's zero in on ag. Where do you see ag profitability? This chart I think is interesting because what this chart shows, and I know some of you in the back can't see it, so I'll just give you the thumbnail view. Those blue bars are expected profitability. If you asked me before 2007, how much money do you think a typical farmer in Indiana is going to make going into planting? I'd say plus or minus $50. The year that looks pretty bright, he's got probably looking about a $50 profit, and a lot of years he's looking at a loss of about $50. Total loss, okay, this is total economic cost. The last few years, those blue bars were really big. In fact, you got up like $200 an acre. Before you plant the crop, given what prices were, you pay all your costs, not just fertilizer and seed, equipment, land, opportunity cost on land, you name it, all of it in. Looking at economic profit, $200 an acre. Wow. Those were good days, weren't they? Book it, right? right before the year even started. You could lock it in. Today, now we're looking at negative $100. Ooh, that's the other way. What happened to negative 50? I want that one, right? Now we're looking at negative $100 an acre. Why has this happened? In part because we had so much profitability, all of our fixed costs have done what? All the fixed costs have gone up. So it's going to be hard to get rid of those until our fixed costs adjust. Now, I will tell you, I took my class lots of places where I was at Cornell, visited lots of farms. I'll never forget, we went to visit an old cattle feeder. That's like big feeder, I don't know, those days it was like 50,000 head, which in those days was big. Now I know that's not as big anymore, but it looked like a lot of cattle to me. And one of my best students looked at that guy and said, you know what, you're pretty smart. I'll bet you lock in profit on every one of those animals before you put them in the feed tray, don't you? And he just looked at her and he smiled. He said, young lady, life is seldom so easy, right? Okay? The point is, there are a lot of years when we go and plant that crop when we're not looking at economic profits, okay? This is more the norm. The size of it leaves a little bit to be desired, but a lot of times we plant the crop, okay, expecting that maybe things get better. The other key thing to understand about the margin squeeze that we're in is what's going to adjust, okay? Here's where farmers spend their money. 25% go to fertilizer, seed, and pesticides, crop protection, that kind of stuff. So about 25% of the costs go there. And this is Indiana, but I mean, it's pretty close for our farm too, so I guess about right. You got some other variable costs of 14%, and then you got machinery at 16%, land 35%, family labor, non. This is probably the most important chart to thinking about the margin squeeze and understanding. How much of your costs are variable? Less than half. So what are farmers going to do when it comes time to plant? You're going to plant, or you're going to just let the plant sit idle? Plant, right? Because if you can get a price above your variable cost, what are you doing? Making a contribution to your fixed costs, right? So as a result, how much relief are we going to get on fertilizer, seed, and pesticides? Not a lot, because we're all going to plant it. Okay? Because as a proportion of our total cost, the variable costs are low. So when times get tight, people don't necessarily stop and shut the factory off. If you had a factory, most industries are not, a lot of industries are not like this. Much higher variable costs. And so when prices drop, what do? Start idling the plant. And shutting it down. Okay, because they can't meet variable costs. So then the input demands and all that other stuff slows down. In this case, we don't do that. And it's not economically rational to do it. As long as you make contribution to your fixed costs, you're going to plant. So as a result, I asked my son, I said, figure it out. You know, get on the computer and figure it out. He's 3. And I said, you maybe got as good a chance as I do figuring this out. It doesn't look pretty. Now, what I would say is that, look, this margin compression is going to be alleviated when one of 3 things, or a combination of these 3 things happen. Prices increase. I'll take that one. Okay. Fixed costs adjust downward, or some combination. Okay, so it's really just 3 alternatives. 2 things can happen. So this is what we're looking at. Where are the fixed costs? What can we adjust on the fixed cost side? Rents, equipment, family living, and land values. On the mitigating side, we got a few good things going for us. We got crop insurance. We can change some things on the crop mix, so we don't all have to continue to plant corn. We can plant other things, and in some parts of the country, they're going to do that. Okay? And then there is a government program that's going to give us some relief. So I think, you know, all in all, we're going to get some benefits to mitigate it. But I look at equipment, and this is a post we wrote on equipment in the U.S. The blue bar is the number of total combines, which you look at that by itself and go, oh, geez, we got fewer combines today than we did back in 1997. What's the problem? They're all new, okay? And if you're an equipment dealer right now, you're very worried about used equipment prices, right? They are nervous because what are people going to stop doing? Buying new equipment, okay? There is a real worry in the equipment industry about that. Here's the tractors, okay? Tractor numbers have actually increased and gotten newer. So farmers, in my opinion, are very well equipped. We have way too much capacity in this industry. I mean, you don't agree with me? I mean, my dad's, yeah, absolutely, okay? We've got way too much iron. I look at our farm, and it just kills me. We're harvesting corn, all the trucks are gone, grain carts are full, combines are full, we're all sitting there. What's happening in the grain cart tractor? Is it off or on? It's running, okay? Why is it running? Well, you got a radio. Now you can actually get that without having the tractor on, right? We got a heater, yeah, that might be nice. Or you got an air conditioner, okay? That's why it's running, right? Now, is that a big tractor or a little tractor? Big tractor. Expensive hours or cheap hours? Those are expensive. Everybody's always talking about, we got to size the combine. Like, we're wasting so much money letting those stupid tractors idle. And look at the horsepower utilization, it's embarrassing. Okay? But even I am not stupid enough to tell our grain cart operator to shut it off because it's who? Grandma or my wife. That's money I ever spent. That's money I ever spent. Okay? But just we've got to do better on equipment utilization. Family living. This is data from Kansas State, and I know they make a lot of YouTube videos down there about farm songs and all that kind of stuff. Seems like every farm in Kansas got a YouTube video. Okay? But look at what has happened in family living. It's really gone up. Okay? Now, look. I don't. You have to enjoy it sometime, right? Okay, but the toys used to be things like four-wheelers, right? Now it's airplanes and race cars, okay? So the magnitude has gotten a little bit higher, okay? It's something to watch going forward, and a place where I think we can cut. Okay? So those are kind of things I think to think about. Now, on the other hand, to me, we are at a critical point, absolutely critical point, because the million-dollar question, in my opinion, is how much corn and soybeans are going to get planted this year. And the reason I think it's critical is because we are not, as some people have said, awash in corn. Okay? We're not awash. We're well supplied. We've got adequate stocks, but we're by no means got run out our ears like we had in the government payment era, and our caps got, in Nebraska, I don't think it's happened in South Dakota, our caps got real curved, in those days, because before direct deposit, and we always were looking at mailbox to get our government checks. Bills got curved, okay? Nowadays, direct deposit, so we flatten them back out. Now, the reality, though, is, look, the market is going to help us decide this. If we get prices high enough that everybody goes out and plants as much corn as they planted the last few years, it's going to take a really bad weather event to put a dent in supply, and we're going to be out of line, okay? And prices are not going to be good. On the other hand, if we don't get enough planted, we've got upside because we may not get a perfect year, okay? So I think it's going to be really interesting to see where plantings shake out. And the only thing I can think to look at is, look at this. We planted 80 million acres of corn in 2000. In 2012, I think it was, we planted about 80 or 97 million acres. Where on earth did all that come from? How do we do that? Because I thought everybody says they're not making any more of it, right? No more land. They're not making any more. Are they? The world isn't getting bigger, okay? We can reallocate it, and we can bring it out of things like CRP. These are corn acres, soybean acres generally do the opposite. So my first question is, where on earth did we get all the corn? Well, here are the states ranked by size of corn production, and this is the increase over that time period, 2000 to 2004 versus 2014 to 2010. Just took the averages and said, where did the increase come from? Iowa, yeah, they're number one. Gotta be number one something. They are. About 1.5 million acre increase in corn acres over that time period. Here's the rest of the Corn Belt up to Ohio. That's about 60% of the increase. Any bar jump out at anyone there? It's that one in the middle, because they're not really in the heart of the Corn Belt, but boy, they did a lot there. They increased more than any other state. Who is it? Your neighbors to the north, North Dakota, put in about 1.6 million more acres of corn. Okay? Now, so they're going to be important to watch in this environment, what they do. Because if you're in Iowa, what are you going to plant? Corn or soybeans, right? It's one of those two. I mean, we can debate corn versus soybeans, but it's one of those two. Getting to North Dakota isn't that clear cut. They've grown lots of crops, right? The area I come from, we have a lot of those marginal acres that can go lots of different directions. And there's lots of different crops you can grow out there. And I think you're going to see people start to look at that again. Then the other interesting thing are all these states, because this is only 60% in the heart of the Corn Belt, and most of that came out of soybeans. The rest of these, a lot of them are in the south. Okay? Here's Arkansas, put in 350,000 acres more corn. They grow anything else down there? You better believe it. There's a lot of stuff down there. When corn is $7 a bushel, what do you plant? Corn. Even Nebraska farmers can figure that one out. Okay? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. And everybody figured it out. The question now is, what do we do at 4? Here's soybeans. Here's another one. Here's this big chart bar in the middle. What's that? North Dakota. Another 1.7 million acres of soybeans went in up there, so they added a lot of soybeans too. But look at Iowa, Illinois, Minnesota, Indiana, actual decreases in soybean acres. Look for some of that to switch back, okay? And I would look out in this area to see what those people are going to do going forward. Here's crop insurance. And this is part of the reason planting corn was so easy. Here's corn crop insurance. Here's 2011. Our guarantee was $6 a bushel. I figured 80% revenue coverage, 200 bushels an acre. That gave you a revenue guarantee in Indiana of about $962 an acre. In those days, the variable costs were $413, which meant they had $549 guaranteed, before they ever planted the crop. And that was enough to cover all their fixed costs and even land rents today. Those were special times. And it didn't take a rocket scientist, as I said, to figure out if you plant corn when that happens. They did. Now the question is a little bit different, because here we are in 2015. I updated this January 14th. It's gone down some more since then. 409 corn price. That gives you a guarantee of $654. Variable cost now are $463. Now we're left with $191. Okay? Now keep in mind, this is at 80%. It's not normal that at 80% of revenue you cover all your costs and make a profit. There happened a few of this year, but not very many. Now it's a little bit tighter. And here's the interesting thing. Here's soybeans. Their guarantee is $238. Soybeans look a little better under that calculation, don't they? They certainly look better in a rotation if you get a benefit for rotation. But the question I have that lingers in the back of my mind is, well, what did it look like in 2014? Well, there was corn at $294 and there's soybeans at $305. Soybeans look better then too, right? What did people plant? A lot of corn. The soybean acres went up. But I would look for that trend to continue again if this kind of relationship holds. And I think it's going to be very important, something to watch very carefully as to what these guarantees shake out at. How you doing on the farm program? Got that one figured out? Okay? Boy, what a crazy program. There are a lot of frustrated people I talk to with this decision. It's a hard one to make. Okay? I don't know what farmers are going to choose. I think it depends a lot on your area and your commodity. I can say in our situation, for us under irrigation, corn, I think the Ark County program looks pretty attractive. Wheat, I don't know. Maybe PLC, but again, it's going to depend on your yields and all kinds of complicated variables that I don't know for this area. But the point of this chart is to say, well, here's Indiana, Iowa, Nebraska, North Dakota. Oh, yep, South Dakota. What is that? Beetle? Beetle County? Which one's that? That's around. Okay, there they are. Okay. So we're looking at a total, if you believe the computers, which I caution you to not to believe them too carefully, of about $140 an acre over the course of 5 years. Now what I would say, so my point is there's going to be some support from the government program. It's not going to be massive support, though. Okay? There's going to be some support. There are tough things about this is that it's really hard to predict. Here we are, we're well into the corn marketing year. I honestly do not know where that price is going to shake out. It's tough, okay, to figure out. And to project it for 5 years is even tougher, okay? So the thing I just caution farmers about is, I hear a lot about it's a risk management program. I urge you to think carefully about that because it's, in my opinion, it's not. Okay, tell me how it manages risk when the payout doesn't depend on what I plant or what I harvest or how much of it I harvest. How does that help you manage risk? Give me income. Okay? It manages risk about like a direct payment did. It gives me some more income. But it doesn't necessarily depend on what you grow or what you harvest. So don't look to this program to manage all your risk. I think it may give you some income, but the other thing is how many of you can put that in your budget that you give to me here at First Dakota? What number are you going to put in? My banker wasn't, he didn't want to see that in my budget, I know, okay? It's going to be hard to predict. The other thing is the timing is not good. For 2015, you're going to get a payment in 2015 that's going to be based on 2014. So just, I think, when somebody says it's going to manage risk and make everything great, well, I don't know about that. I do think it's going to give you some money. Okay? But I would spend some time figuring it out. And if you're struggling, you're not the only one. The other thing I think we're going to realize here pretty quickly is how strong, solid is the government's commitment to agriculture. Because one of the things we're going to see is bigger commodity payments again. Okay? And the other one that's lurking out there is crop insurance. Okay? Someday somebody may figure out how to get the crop insurance subsidy information and put it on a website. And those are going to be big numbers for a lot of people in this room as to what the subsidies are. I think the expenditures per farmer may be substantial, and we're going to find out how solid their commitment is. Crop insurance, I wouldn't farm without crop insurance, but I think it's got a little bit of a target on it because we move so much of the support there. I think we're going to need to keep reminding the politicians the importance of crop insurance going forward. Okay? Farmland, how much is it going to soften? We used to say, what's next with farmland? I think to me, the logic for increasing farmland values doesn't work right now. I mean, incomes are down, and I know that it always drove me nuts when a reporter called and said, well, pork price is down 20 cents today. What do you think it's going to do to farmland values? I'm like, I don't know. It's irrelevant, right? You don't buy a farm for the returns next year or the year after that. You're buying it for the next 20 years, right? I mean, it's a long-term investment. Now, what I do think is it's hard to argue that we haven't pushed prices to the point where you have to have awfully rosy expectations about price levels to make it make sense. But one of the reasons they've gone up so much is these are interest rates, and we talk about that a lot. These are what we call a capitalization rate on farmland. Take your cash rent, divide by the land value. That gives you a rate of return. In Nebraska, on irrigated, we're about 4%. In Iowa, you're down in that 3% range. Indiana, we pushed even under 3% for a while. Okay, that's giving you a rate of return. Now the blue line is the 10-year Treasury bond. And what you can see is that those capitalization rates followed interest rates down. It's an opportunity cost. Okay? What would you rather have? 2% for 10 years from the government, or a farm that may make you 3%, 4%? A lot of people took farm. Okay? Why did people want to sell farms when the prices were so high? Well, geez, what else can you do with money, right? I mean, it takes a big mattress to fit all that money in. Because you don't get much for it putting it in the bank. Okay? So I think this all goes hand in hand. We have to watch these interest rates. If they start heading up, it's going to put a lot of pressure on farmland. We're already getting pressure from the income side falling. Okay? So keep an eye on farmland. I think it could go down. I think the market is already telling us it's softer. Most of the reports I see are showing softness in farmland values. I would expect that to continue. I don't think it's going to debacle like here. Okay, 10-year Treasury bond went up, capitalization rates went down. Why? Because farmland prices couldn't fall fast enough. Eventually they did. We got right back on that line. Okay? So just keep that in mind. I think the logic of pushing farmland prices higher doesn't work very well. This is income per acre on the horizontal, land price on the vertical. And I drew in Indiana. I know we're not in Indiana, but it's a good illustration. That blue line is a 3% cap rate. So if you believe 3% cap rate, if you've got $300 an acre income, 3% cap rate, that puts you at about $9,000. That's about where we're at. Now, what if how long does that income have to last? For a long time, forever, right? And so if $300 acre cash rent isn't sustainable, then $10,000 acre farmland isn't sustainable. And the problem is not $10,000, it's what was that land selling for? I did a lot of talks in Indiana. And I used to, when the price was really going up, and said, look, if you want to sell me land for what Purdue says it's worth, I'll buy it at the end of this meeting. And I never even had anybody talk to me about it, right? Now, I wouldn't make that claim today, so I'm not getting one. Okay? But that land was selling up there in that $14,000 range. Now, if you want a 3% return, you've got to have $400 an acre cash rent. Could you get that? You bet you could. What about today? Maybe. Maybe. But it's a lot harder calculation to get up there than it used to be. So I think there's going to be pressure on it. And there's a real question as to how landowners react if prices start falling. And then in the long run, there's just a big supply of land. This chart shows area and production, okay, of selected row crops around the world. Now, there was a big run-up, culminated in about 1980. That run-up started when another Purdue professor became very famous, made a deal with the Russians. His name was Earl Butz. And Earl Butz went to Russia and he did what? He sold the entire U.S. grain reserve to the Russians. Not just a little, he sold it all. And then he came on and told the American farmers to do what? Venture. And did they? You better believe it. And did people around the world do it? You better believe it. We got a whole bunch of land coming in, not because of what Earl told them to do. He didn't have that much power. Because prices went up, because the market perceived demand had shifted out with the Russians buying. Think about back in those days. And I grew up kind of at the end of the Cold War. But I remember, looking at blast radius circles, right? I don't know if anybody else remembers that. They put those maps in the paper to show if there was a thermonuclear war, who would be covered, right? And And in Nebraska, we had Strategic Air Command, and we were just far enough to the west, out in the Great American Desert, that we weren't covered, okay? And I was like, yes, we're gonna make it, right? But hey, Mom, we're safe. If nobody cares about what we're doing out here. And then Ronald Reagan put the Minuteman missiles in western Nebraska, and we're screwed. We're going down with everybody else. So the thing about the mindset, all of a sudden Russia's buying grain, we're running a cold race with them. Their economy's humming, right? Everybody thinks they're doing well. What was reality? Not so good, right? And as soon as they got the people fed, what did they do? Quit buying grain. And then they did something that really torqued us off. What? Invaded Afghanistan. And our response was, we're not sending our athletes to the Olympics. That'll teach them. No, then that didn't do it. So what American farmer who became president decided to do? Borrow grain. Now all of a sudden that demand shift that we thought we had, it was illusory anyway. It wasn't even a real demand shift. We go to a demand contraction. Prices fall. Terrible financial crisis because Paul Volcker came in and killed off inflation. Terrible conspiracy of events that happened, and it cost about 100,000 good farmers and their families their farms. It was a terrible environment, okay? Terrible disaster. We don't want to see that again. My point with this is, even how bad it got, did farm acres go down appreciably after that? No. They stayed. And they stayed until when? Emerging markets and biofuels. And now what have we done? Increased acres. Okay. Are they going away when prices go lower? No way. Okay. And not only in the U.S. have we increased acres, and around the world we increased acres, we made the acres here a lot more efficient. You go talk in Nebraska, and you're probably doing this room. How many of you put up a center pivot in the last 5 years? A whole bunch of hands go up. You go to Indiana, how many of you put in tile? Oh yeah. Rained a whole bunch, they put in tile, then it didn't rain, so they did what? They bought irrigation systems, right? So now they can run it out the tiles. Okay? We have made our system a lot more productive, and we're going to deal with that for a while. This is CRP. In the 80s, what did we do when all this is happening? What was the solution? Fentress, heck with that. Let's put it in CRP. And we put a bunch in. Now it's coming out, and it's coming out in places like North Dakota. Okay, there they are, western Nebraska. And that trend is likely to continue, because I don't know if you've tried to put ground in CRP, but I have. And when your payment is about twice your taxes, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay? It's hard to think about how that makes sense. So I don't see the CRP building back up. There's a lot of political will for it either. Credit risk, I think the thing that we have to think about a little bit is, well, how solid is the financial footing of American agriculture? Most of the data is pretty favorable, but this shows that real estate debt has gone up all through the farm boom. I always heard, oh, they're buying with cash. Well, some of it, a little bit. Some of it was cash that was backed by debt. So we have a lot of real estate debt, but I don't think it's the point where it's anything onerous, okay? Now, keep in mind, we had a housing crisis in the United States, a debt crisis, right? Did we have too much housing debt in the United States? Well, not really. If Warren Buffett had his share, Bill Gates had his share, and whoever else had their share of housing debt, we wouldn't have any problems, would we? The problem was the wrong people had it. Okay? And in agriculture, that's something we got to keep track of and just watch. But I think we're going to look for a shock here and see. I don't perceive that we're going to see anything terrible in this phase. The good news for American agriculture, though, is like I started out. 6 out of 7 people live in emerging markets, which are now red on this chart. Total world population, here's the developed world. Something really important happened in the last few years. People in emerging markets, this chart shows purchasing power. Here's the developed world. Back in the 80s, we had 70% of the world's purchasing power. Those emerging economies had about 30. Well, just a couple of years ago, they actually passed us. So the 6 people now have more purchasing power than the one that lives in the developed economy. Why is this important? It's important because those 6 people are about to get choice. They're about to get the choice of what to eat. They haven't had that. They get to choose what they're going to eat. When they get more money, they're going to eat better. Okay? And don't believe me, the data support that. This curve just shows income on the horizontal, percent animal protein on the vertical. Here's the United States. We're way out here at the top. Okay, about 60-some% of our diet protein comes from animals. China is way down here in the 30s. Remember that rule of 72. If they can grow 7%, 10 years from now, they're going to be over here, getting up into the 40s. A lot of people are about to get a choice of what they want to eat. In the United States, we have a choice of what we can eat. And so what do we choose? Well, we're getting older. Some of us are not in very good shape. So we try and eat healthier, right? And we've got all these kinds of crazy things going on about food and all this other stuff. I was driving into Las Vegas, and I took this picture. Why want one to eat the other? Digging it off, right? These are the debates we have in the developed world, right? Now, I'll tell you, there are a lot of people in those emerging economies that treat them the same. So this is the bull story of American agriculture. This is very bullish for us. More animal protein consumption is really good, whether you're growing animals or you're growing grains or whatever it is. Because think about it, everybody complains, put nothing on the gas. That's food versus fuel. You're putting food in your gas tank. That's bad, right? No, I think it's a choice. Whatever. Well, you know, maybe you eat a steak. Why are you eating a steak? You should eat pig. They're more efficient, right? They convert grain to meat better than beef. More efficient. That's better, right? Well, why are you eating a pig? You ought to eat a chicken. They're more efficient. Yeah, well, why are we even eating meat? It's choice, because it tastes good. We like it, right? This is the full story of American agriculture. The problem with it is a long-term trend, okay? So don't confuse a long-term trend for something that's going to happen overnight. This is going to help us for the long term, but it's not going to save us this year. Okay? Energy prices, I don't know how much oil and gas we have in this state. Certainly your neighbors to the north have been blessed with wonderful amounts of it. And as a result, energy prices are down a lot. Okay? The big concern on energy is this a harbinger of slower global economic growth? Because everybody's getting worried and freaked out that the Chinese now are not consuming as much, their economy's slowing more than we thought. It's something you're going to want to keep watching. I personally think a lot of it is still supply driven and not as much demand driven. We've just expanded supply an awful lot, but this is something to keep your eye on. The other thing is to keep your eye, this is a huge market. Okay? Anytime you have big moves in a market of this size, watch out, because somebody's going to get caught. Remember when the Swiss franc, the Swiss changed, when they're getting ready for the EU to do quantitative easing, like, you know, we can't hold the value of the Swiss franc to let her go. What happened? Bankrupted about 3 trading houses overnight. Okay? Huge market. Lots of people exposed, lots of leverage. Oil is a pretty darn big market too, and I think we have to think about what are the geopolitical and market implications of this going forward, because who's hurt most by this whole oil thing going lower? Certainly, our friend that's battling the Ukrainians right now is not too excited about this, okay? Russia doesn't have a lot of debt at the sovereign level. But what they do have are a lot of companies that borrow a lot of money. And they're kind of crony companies, you know, he kind of controls them. Venezuela, all of the people in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia's got the lowest oil production costs in the world, but they've got pretty high sovereign demands too. They've got a lot of people they got to keep happy. Okay, so how all this plays out is something we want to keep an eye on. Ethanol, I get asked a lot, what's the speed for ethanol? Good or bad? Well, in the short term, it's not real good, right? Because it's going to squeeze up, because now gasoline has gotten to the point it's getting hard to justify blending it into the gas, right? But I think the oil companies are a little reluctant to admit that because they almost have to admit when prices were high, it was profitable for them to put it in, and they don't like to seem to admit that, right? But right now, it's going to put pressure on ethanol. As long as the RFS holds, I think in the long run this can be good. Because what's holding ethanol back the most? It's the blend wall, okay? When gasoline demand has fallen significantly with higher energy prices, because people started doing things like buying hybrids and buying fuel-efficient cars, and miles driven went down. If this spurs some more demand, perhaps, if you want to be an optimist, you say, well, maybe at least some more miles driven, more gasoline demand, and then as long as the RFS holds, more ethanol demand. The biggest risk right now is what happens to the renewable fuel standard. If you take the renewable fuel standard away overnight and say, oh, no more, I'm going to do that, it would make we would have the 80s all over. It would be an absolute disaster. I don't think that's going to happen. But the EPA was talking about relaxing a little bit, something to keep on your radar. Did a lot of programs in Iowa. I should always thank those guys. Well, I'll tell you what, they wrote letters. They wrote letters when the EPA proposed reducing the renewable fuel standard. I think we all should write letters because it's really important to us. Here's the global situation. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. This is just the Euro meltdown. Europe is a problem. It's a problem. And, you know, China's our market, Japan's our market. Well, the EU is China's biggest market. It matters what happens there. We really need them to get their act together. The problem is, it's really hard. The best analogy I heard a really good economist say is, he says, look, it's like they're all sitting at a dinner table, they've all ate, they partied, they had a great time, and the waiter just came with the check. And he laid it on the table, and it's like, oh, whatever, give us another round, okay? The guy came back. Now he's coming back, and now he really wants to know who's going to pay this bill. And all the people at the table are looking around, well, not me. Send it down there to Germany. Germany's like, no way. Give it to Greece. You know, let them deal with it. That, I think, is a good analogy. It's just going to be tough to get that sorted out. What Putin does, you know, I don't know, but I think I would watch more the reverberations from the oil price than anything there. But what I like to say is, look, let's just take time out for some perspective, okay? And the best story I've ever heard is a friend of mine, David Whitmore, right with, his dad worked at the Kansas Department of Roads, and he told a story. Two roads in Kansas come together. One of them is a road that goes through town, it's like a main street. The other is like a 65-mile-an-hour 2-lane road, and it goes down to like, from 65 down to 35 right away, and it curves right into there, okay? And there's always bad accidents there. And one day, there was a really bad accident. Okay, and the call came in. The guy got in a fire truck, an ambulance behind him, and a police car, and they go out to the scene. And they're looking at it, and he comes over the hill and he sees it. He's like, oh my God, he calls them around. Send everybody you got. It's an absolute disaster. There's cars everywhere. Just send everybody. This is what he saw. Okay? This is an actual picture, okay, from the Kansas Department of Roads. Now, if you can see it, people in the front can see it, people in the back can't. What kind of cars are those? Wrecked cars. What had happened? A semi-trailer carrying wrecked cars turned over. Cars everywhere. The guy was right. But his mind frame was, man, we're going to have a train wreck. Okay? And I think right now in agriculture, everybody's a little bit on edge for the train wreck that's coming. But we've got to keep in mind, you know, we've been through these things before, we're going to get through it again. Now is not the time necessarily. The analogy I heard the other day was, look, if you're going down and you see a slick road ahead sign, what do? Slam on the brakes, put your foot on the foot feet, put both hands on the wheel and pay attention, right? You may ease off the accelerator, right? I think that's a great analogy for this environment. So let's think about strategy. This is my daughter Jacqueline. She's a master strategist. She can get anything out of me she wants, okay? Dear Tooth Fairy, I don't know where my tooth is. I was eating ice cream, which we're going to do here in a second when I quit yakking. I don't know where my tooth went, but it was gone after the ice cream. Will you still give me the money? We can do better with her strategy. She's got to figure it out. She got to let the right person, she got the money, right? But I think we can do better. 12 strategies. Okay, and then we'll wrap it up. Maintain ample cash and operating credit. Okay? Now's the time. Make sure your operating cash is available, and you answer that question: how much cash do I need to run my business comfortably? Think about that. Think about how much credit you need and get it arranged. Get your fixed costs under control. That's the, at the end of the day, we talked about it. Variable costs are not going to go down a lot because we're going to do what? We're going to plant the crops. We may plant a few less corn acres. We may get some relief eventually on seed and fertilizer and all those things, but it's not going to probably be enough. Okay, we've got to get our fixed costs under control. Carefully evaluate your debt structure. And by that I mean, most farmers have lots of assets at the bottom of the balance sheet, land, less at the top. And we tend to like to do what? Borrow shorter, pay it back, get it paid back, right? And I don't disagree with that, especially when times are good. But there's a matching principle. We put the less liquid assets at the bottom and most liquid at the top, cash, okay? And equipment, and then land. And we should structure our debt to match the proportions, okay? Because it helps us with cash flow when things get tough, okay? If you're in a tight environment, paying that land off in 5 years is a heck of a lot harder than it was last few years, right? So we want to probably think about lengthening term to match our balance sheet assets, okay? You can always pay it off faster, but now is the time to get that structured because it's much easier to do ahead of this than when everybody else is trying to do it. So think about, where your assets are at and where your debt is at. Too much short term is going to put a lot harder time on you and a margin squeeze servicing that debt. Okay? Get a low cost of production. I mean, you know this, right? It's the name of the game for most of us. Now, some of you may be operating a different kind of business where that isn't the key thing. But thinking about how do you lower your costs every day is really important. And that gets back to things like those tractors around. Because when I go to trade those tractors, the John Deere guy comes on and gives me the utilization report. It's like, look, this is where you're at. When I go to trade those tractors, do you think he's going to care that a bunch of those hours were idle? I can argue with him, but is that going to go very far? No, it's an hour, right? We've got to think about getting low cost of production. Implement a risk management plan. Managing risks were easier when prices were always above, particularly total cost of production. But we went through a period where most prices were above total cost of production. That's not really managing risk. I mean, we're in an environment now where we may fluctuate below total cost of production, and we may approach variable costs. Now, you have to make trade-offs. Okay? And risk is about trade-offs. You can't remove the downside without giving up something on the upside. It's just not possible. And I think those are hard decisions to have. There are hard things to do, I know. Okay? It's hard, but have the conversation with your family and your business partners about what is an acceptable level of risk. Can we do things to reduce it, but implement that risk management plan. Consider diversification. I'm not talking corn versus soybeans, particularly for young farmers. I love that young farmer program. In part, I love it because it's not about it's not about a lower interest rate. It's about education. I mean, the stuff between the ears is really important. I always encourage young farmers, think about other things you can sell besides just growing another acre of corn. You've got a lot of skills and expertise that some of those old guys don't have. Are there ways to get that expertise on other farms? I.e. do things for other farmers in precision agriculture or other things. Okay? I don't know exactly what it is in your case, but there are lots of different things you can do. Think about diversifying income another way. Make the hard decision, if you're in a tight position, to offload the assets. Mike Bolch has a lot of programs with him. He's a famous professor at Purdue. And he tells a very powerful story about how he and his brother at their family business meeting held at Christmas. That's the worst time to have it, right? Right before Christmas, at family business meeting, he and his brother in 1985 go in and say, look, we got to sell some land. His dad didn't talk to him for 3 years. He and his brother talked to his mom into voting with him, and they sold it. 3 years later, his dad finally talked to him and said, you know what, you're right, we would have lost the whole darn thing if you hadn't done it. Okay? Those are hard things to do. Okay? But sometimes they're the right thing to do. Make a good choice in the government program, moderate the growth strategies. I think, there's going to be a point if things go down too much, then that's when the opportunities come. Okay? We have to prepare for those. Communicate with your lenders. Communicate with all of the people that supply your business. Help them understand your needs better. Spend some time talking with those equipment dealers. My question to those guys the other day, I said, look, is there any way I can find a high-hour used tractor that you got them sitting there, would you be interested in leasing that during harvest to me? Because I'll put my wife's like, I don't know. Fix that new one. Okay? And they're like, no. But at least we start, so now they've got at least planned in their mind what I'm trying to do, right? They know I'm thinking about this. I think it's important to communicate. Brush up on the agronomics, and I think that's influenced by just me, because I don't know much about it. I've really got to get better at that. But I think it's back to blocking and tackling, doing the things you do well as farmers, and develop a strategic plan. Think about where you want to be 5 years from now, okay? And put that plan in place. This is a business, and we have to think about it as such. Focus, Peter Drucker said very well, deploy resources today for tomorrow's environment, reality, versus defending what we did yesterday. That's really good advice, right? The environment is shifting. It may come back, we may get hyped, maybe next year, we don't plant very much corn, and you have a bad year, and Iowa, and you guys here in South Dakota knock it out of the park, and we're sitting high, right? It's possible. But I think the environment, the big driver, demand shift that we went through at biofuels is over. It's changed. And now the emerging markets are slowing a little bit. The environment shifted, and we have to prepare for it. The future is very bright. It's very bright. Okay? But we've got to realize the environment we're operating in, I think it's a little different than it has been the last few years. Whoops.